We just came out of last Thursday. We were talking about the influence of the constellations, and today we're going to go into the more detail, sort of the details of providence. We have been talking over this last few weeks about providence itself. What is providence? And when we're using providence in the Jewish sense, we're talking about how God interacts with His creation. What are the methods in which He interacts? How does He judge His creation? What's His management of government or whatever in creation? And now we're going to be dealing with some particular details with providence. In chapter 8, page 169 of Derech Hashem, it says, among the things that we must realize is that the entire procedure and system of God's providence involves the fairest possible role of justice. The psalmist thus said to God in Tehillim 45:7, which would be Psalms 45:7, the scepter of your kingdom is a scepter of fairness, and it is likewise written in Meshli 29:4, the king sustains the land with justice. Well, one of the major details that we are going to understand about God's providence is everything is done on the highest level of justice and fairness. God is not vengeful. He's not looking for a way to punish people. I had I think it was Paul right before class was talking about someone he knows that said that they were sort of agnostic or maybe atheist, wasn't really sure. You know, they kind of wanted to believe in a God, but they have a difficult time believing in God because they had a real good friend at 12 years old that was killed, or was injured and permanently paralyzed from chest down. And so her idea is, if there's such a God, why would He do those kinds of things? And even before discussing the lesson, one of the first things that I mentioned is, that is probably one of the biggest questions to have to contend with a lot of people. But for one to properly deal with that, you almost have to step back and get a satellite view of the world and try to understand how providence works. When we understand how providence works, we would typically say, yes, it's beyond me. I don't understand why this has happened. But according to divine providence and the details of divine providence, good must be the purpose behind it, even though I can't see good. Good has to be the purpose behind it, because God is not in the business of capriciously punishing people and hurting people without the proper fairness to be involved. The next part of this paragraph, it says, we know, however, that God desires only to do good and loves His handiwork as a father loves his children. Now, we all know that there are fathers who claim to love their children and still abuse them. We know that's a fact. But we're not talking about an imperfect created being. We're talking about the Creator of the universe, who's absolutely perfect and pure in who He is. Someone mentioned that I'm not sure that I believe in God that can do X, Y, Z. And I remember hearing, I think it was Rabbi Ginsburg say, someone explained, I can't imagine a God that would do this, this, and this, and how could I ever believe in a God that would do these things? And his response was, I agree, I wouldn't want to believe in a God like that either. Because we do know that the God that we serve is not a man, He's not a woman, He is pure energy, pure luminescence, pure light, and we all experience the great benefit of having a relationship of knowledge with the Creator. I had a young man from Louisiana today send me a text, and he was raised in a Christian religious home, and he says, I'm not really sure if I can believe in God. Now notice the words, I can believe in God. And his explanation was, there are so many religions, so many different choices, everybody has a God, and it's very difficult for me to just believe in a God. Why not just throw it all out and say I can't figure it out? And so my response was pretty simple, and that is, listen, there is only one God. So it's not like you have to choose between gods. There is only actually one God, and it's to find out who that one God is. Now, if you can find the one that says that he is the architect of creation, then you should look at that. And if this one God says that he has provided and given his law to his people and a law to the nations, you should look at that. Because all of these other deities that claim to be God, or people claim that they are God, do not offer these kinds of resolutions. What they offer is some type of deeper explanation of deity and God without being the original source. So I said, just go to the source, find out who that one God is, and serve him. The one good thing about the nations is that a person can be a righteous person in the nations and not really know who God is. Does that make sense? It's all right. If he doesn't quite comprehend the vast enormity of God, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that I do. I'm not sure that I can comprehend how he's all energy, he's all light, but yet we don't see the light on the spectrum that we see light. So what is that light when he says he's light? We'll be talking about that in a moment. God's law and judgment, therefore, also originate in his love. This punishment is not hateful revenge, but the discipline of a loving father who only desires good for his children. This principle has two corollaries. First, the punishment itself is alleviated. God's love tempers his judgment with mercy, and the punishment is therefore not harsh and cruel. Now, is it possible for a child to think that a father or mother's punishment is harsh and cruel? Yeah. Have you seen Jimmy Kimmel's thing that he does, the joke on children? He has parents videotape when he tells them they ate their candy for Halloween. Right? It's amazing how this sweet little adorable girl or boy turns into a murderous human being. Right? Like swinging and punching and I hate you. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what happened to that? Right?
You ruined my life.
You ruined my life, right? Yeah, and then you have the occasional child that'll go, that's all right, Mommy, I'm okay. Yeah. And it's funny because one little girl says, that's all right, Mommy, I'm okay. And she goes, are you crying? She goes, no, my eyes are leaking. She didn't want to hurt her mom's feelings. I couldn't watch the whole thing because I felt so sorry for the children in the video. It was amazing. But saying that is, when we face his judgment, you're going to feel the warmth of his judgment in the sense that he's a loving father. And his goal is not to destroy you, but to save you and to bring you to life. First, the punishment itself is alleviated. God's love, and I'm going to read this again, tempers his judgment with mercy. Second, when necessary, God sometimes suspends the rule of justice completely and operates alone in mercy. Thus is the meaning of what he told Moshe in Shemot 33:19. I will show mercy upon whom I will have shown mercy, and I will show compassion to whom I will show compassion. We've said this many times. We all say how God is just, but none of us want to experience the justice of God. Right? We want to experience the mercy and the compassion of God. So therefore, God willed, however, that man should have free will to act as he desires, and that man's deeds should be recompensed on the basis of a fair system of judgment and reward. To the extent that he can express this, we must say that God subjugated his providence to man's action, subjugating man to good or evil only as his deeds warrant. The truth, however, is that God is not subjugated to any rule whatsoever. He has not need for anything else, nor is he affected by anything. When God desires to impose his superiority, he can therefore act and direct things as he wills with absolute no hindrance. There is absolutely nothing that he must necessarily do. Wow, let's take a back step a few and understand that. God only limits himself through his love for his creation. However, God can suspend justice that is demanded to show mercy. And with that being said, we can see now the fact that God, though there is a strict justice in the world and there needs to be a protocol how things are set up, God can circumvent those things and express His superior will over a situation. He can suspend those rules. In the manner, He says, He can overlook any sin or rectify any wrong through His omnipotent power. Wow. Does it remind you of something? You remember 2 or 3 different occasions when it says, and there was no sin in Jacob's tents. There was nothing wrong, nothing adverse in the tent of Jacob. Meaning the Jewish people, the tent of Jacob or Judah. With that being said, well, we know that there was plenty of things that had gone wrong with them, but somehow God just decided to say, I didn't see anything. So what we can be guaranteed that if we live a life of repentance and tshuva, when we stand before judgment, before Hashem, though He could, in His sense of justice, repay you for the negative and evil that you've done, He chooses not to when you repent. Why? Because He chooses to say that in this place, because of repentance, I can give full pardon. I can fully remove any knowledge or admittance to any sin. He says there's 2 types of providence, therefore, that exist. There is a providence of God's justice, but there is also an overriding providence based on His sole authority. There is law that demands a certain judgment, but there is also His authority that says that He can pardon. Just like a president of this country or a governor in any state can pardon a criminal for his crimes. He can do it. He has the power to do it. That authority can supersede what justice demands. It often can upset people when a president pardons someone who clearly was a criminal. God thus directs all creation in these 2 ways. One involves strict justice, which continually weighs and judges every deed. There is also the overriding providence, however, through which God sustains all creation through His power and omnipotence, not allowing it to be destroyed by the evil afflictions of mankind. Now, we're going to move into paragraph 2. We might have time to... let's go into paragraph 2. Is everybody following so far? Yes? No? Okay. Among the things that must be realized is that God's influence is divided into 2 general categories. One concerns man physically, while the other involves him spiritually. The elements concerned man physically has been discussed, and these involves his successes and prosperity in the world. That which pertains to him spiritually, on the other hand, involves man's intellect and reason, his drawing close to God and his spiritual qualities and advantages. The true optimum state of the world primarily involves man's spiritual state. It exists when man grasps the path of wisdom and is engaged in devotion to his Creator. In such a world, truth is obvious and ambiguous. I can't imagine living in a world where I have no connection to my spiritual existence. I don't know if anybody that listens to this or would even come to class couldn't imagine what your life would be in a completely material world with no spiritual connection. What an emptiness. I remember one night many years ago laying in bed and contemplating that idea of what it would be like to be in a world devoid of the Creator. And how would it feel? Whether devoid because He maybe quote unquote didn't exist, or devoid because I had no connection, no spiritual connection, no connection to my spirituality. And an overwhelming sense of absolute agony and dread came over me. Could you imagine having no hope that there's a Creator that sustains the world by the power of His Word and by His justice and His goodness? And we live in that world. And the ultimate existence in this world, though we are in a physical world, is our spiritual being. As a result of this, security and tranquility prevail, and there is no longer any pain, suffering, or injury. God openly projects His glory into such a world, and He rejoices at His handiwork in similar manner. His handiwork is happy and rejoices before Him. The opposite is the optimum world exists when man becomes overwhelmed by the pursuits of physical desire, rejecting wisdom and furthering himself from it. The Ramchal says that in general, mankind does not love wisdom. They love themselves. They love their desires to be fulfilled. And this is why it is very difficult for some people to connect to that spiritual level, because to connect to that spiritual level, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says that you have to nullify yourself. At some level, you have to take and put your own desires and your lust and your material pursuits in some other category than being primary in its category. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't pursue materialism, we don't pursue wealth, success, whatever. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when you completely have no desire for the wisdom of God and only have desire to fulfill your own ambitions. I couldn't imagine living in that world. I think I would be a very, very miserable person. And yet there are people who live that way. They have no interest in understanding wisdom, and therefore that is why we can live in a society like we do today, that any poll, and it's amazing, any poll that happens, whether it's in politics or opinions, there's always a 40% of certain number of people that you think, have they not been like reading the paper? Do they not realize what's going on in the world around them? Do they not realize what terrorism is doing to the country? I mean, that's what I'm saying. They just are not paying attention. Let's see. Truth is ignored. This is what these people are. Truth is ignored. Wickedness is reinforced and prevails, and deception and error increase. It is a world of false values where good qualities are eclipsed and evil ones prevail. As a result of this, tranquility ceases to exist, and there is no security. While there is much suffering and injury, God hides His glory from the world, and it goes on as if left to chance, abandoned to the laws of nature. God neither rejoices in His handiwork, nor does mankind rejoice in them. Man neither realizes nor recognizes even that it means for creation to rejoice before the Creator. What Ramchal is saying is that the Creator is, in essence, light and illumination. And for it to pass into the world of physicality, it has to pass through us, those who are connected to spirituality. That's how it comes into the material world. And when the material world is the largest number of people, the population, is concealing and hiding it through their own desire, then that society becomes darkened by the whole process. And we can see whole cultures in countries around the world that is darkened by lying, fraud, cheating, murder, robbery. The world that they live in is complete chaos, and it wouldn't take any time long before any society could fall to that level if we begin to conceal wisdom and righteousness in the world. It is my prayer that our society can have a sweet redemption and that we can experience the goodness of God because those of us who do love light are living in that light. And that is really important part of trying to bring out the glory of God that seems to be hidden in some areas of our society. God neither rejoices in His handiwork, nor does mankind rejoice in Him. In such a world, the wicked must become strong, and the good are deprived of all status. We have slowly been on a process in this country where good is bad and bad is good. We are actually experiencing what the Ramchal is talking about. A society in general that makes a conscious effort to claim that everything that is negative to be pure and everything pure is to be negative is a world that has now turned from being a world of light and illumination to darkness. And this is why individuals can claim that we need to remove all guns in society because they kill too many children, yet that same person can believe in abortion. It's a twisted world. Why has the world become that way? Because they have rejected the wisdom of God and embraced their own darkness. It can be seen then that in each of these states, everything is influenced by God. This involves matters pertaining to man physically as well as spiritually. When God withdraws or conceals his illumination and light to that world, to that community, or in an individual, then it should cause that individual to want to turn back to God, to somehow want illumination and light. And I'm praying that the world that we're living in now has seen enough calamity and confusion and darkness to somehow begin to merit seeking the wisdom of God. And we have a big job ahead of us, because this is not going to be resolved by Donald Trump. It's going to be resolved by causing people to engage in a spiritual connection with the Creator. That is the most important thing. We're in now paragraph 3. It says, as we have already discussed earlier, darkness and the world and worldliness are firmly rooted in man's condition in this world. Combined and joined with this, however, some illumination which result in knowledge and enlightenment. When a person is first born, he is irrational and has little intelligence. As he grows, his intellect likewise matures. So a society itself can mature or become, what's the word for it, mentally and emotionally disabled. Make sense? A child comes into this world, and if they have no ability to cognitively develop, they become stuck at that age. There are people that are born and develop autism, or they have Down syndrome, in which they developmentally they stop at a certain age. Unfortunately, there are a lot of spiritual people that are in the same situation. They just somehow stop, and they find themselves rooted in an existence that is far worse than they need to have to be in. And only God knows why some people get stuck in those places. But Baruch Hashem, maybe we can bring light and help to illuminate someone. I had a person call me today, and maybe she's watching on the class. She lives in the Woodlands. She said she's been watching the class on a regular basis, and she has been trying to study the different languages. She wants to know the truth. She's been a Christian. And she said something happened, and like scales fell off her eyes. And she's like, I cannot believe that I see this. She says, I want to tell everybody, but they think I'm crazy, right? They think I'm crazy when I talk about how the Hebrew has numbers and the numbers mean something. It makes it sound like you need to be on your medication, right? And she's like, I'm so glad to find out. When I called, I didn't know you guys were like here. And I said, yeah, we're right here in Humble, Texas. She goes, I'll be there tomorrow morning. She's so excited about coming to class tomorrow morning. We'll welcome her in. But this is just another story of having these classes on, and all it takes is a steady diet of pure Torah. There's no secret to the thing. It's just a steady diet of pure Torah. That light pierces the darkness. It pierces the darkness. No matter how dark it is in that person's world, if they will just look at the light long enough, pretty soon the Torah will come to life for them. The influence of God's illumination thus results in such quantities as clarity and zerus, value, yakar. The concealment of his light, on the other hand, brings about the disadvantages of opaqueness and worthlessness. During any particular creation, it is in its very existence as well as its nature depend upon highly designed mixture which combines these many qualities, for each thing is structured and combined of individual components, and the member components there can be elements of advantage and disadvantages. Now let me break this down a little bit. God's illumination brings clarity and value when the concealment of light disadvantages a person and all he sees is sort of an opaqueness or gray area. Now you can understand why many people have developed what we call relativism in the world that says, well, it's gray, we're not really sure. It's truth to you could be truth to, my truth can be true and your truth can be true, and we can all be true. Well, you and I both know that that's not possible. There are some things, I guess, you have universal truth, that's possible. But you're an architect, Carla, you know there are certain things that work in architecture that you just can't make it up. It's either going to work or it doesn't work, right? And if you went to someone that inspected your work and you told them, well, this is true to me, and they go, this is mechanically unsound, right? Engineering-wise, this won't work. You couldn't make the argument, but yet people make that argument all the time when it comes to their spirituality and connection to God. Regarding any particular creation, its very existence as well as its nature depend highly on the design mixture. We said that already. Let's go on down. The influence, which are the roots of each creation, must therefore be a mix of both revelation of God's light and the withholding of it. The twofold influence being transmitted through the ordained system among channels and degrees until the creation which contains the influence materialize in its desired state of being. Let me ask you, what would happen if the full illumination of the Creator would pierce physicality? Wicked would be completely cease to exist, right? Wicked people would cease to exist completely, be completely consumed. Like a thermonuclear weapon, it would melt away anything that's corrupt, especially corruptible flesh. And we all know that no man can see God and live. Well, what if a man is in the state of spiritual state and he sees God, what is he seeing? You see an old man with a beard, maybe a dove flying around his head, and a young guy going, hey, I'm JC, right? No, that's not what he's going to see. Matter of fact, when people go to the other side, they often say they just see a great light. They see this warmth of mercy and energy that comes from God. But we do know that at some point, God's illumination is going to pierce into physicality. And when it does, it is going to change the world. It's going to be an amazing time. Let's go to paragraph 4. When we look at the world in general, at its history since creation, and when we read the predictions of the prophets, we recognize that humanity itself passes through 4 different basic states of being. In this respect, the history of mankind is very much like the life of an individual, for the individual is born and grows into maturity, so too is the human race. So let's follow this idea. If humanity from the time of creation follows sort of the normal state of the maturation or maturity of a human being, that would mean at the time of Adam to the time of Noah, there is an infancy stage, right? And then from Noah to, let's say from Noah to Egypt, when everybody's, when the people are in Egypt. The families went to Egypt for protection with Joseph. Let's call that from toddler to preteen or teenager, bar mitzvah. They actually get their bar mitzvah at Mount Sinai, right? They still have to grow and mature. Now this includes the rest of the world too, because as far as the world in technology and ability, et cetera, there is this maturing process that's taking place in the world. Many of the nations of the world up until about half that time still didn't have a proper formation of laws that were written down on stone tablets. It was early, more developed civilizations that began to do that. And that's where we get this idea from the Assyrian, the Rosetta Stone, et cetera, et cetera. So imagine at Sinai they have their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, and then for these next few years they wander in this world of mistakes and victories, good things and bad things, in a very close relationship with God. And finally, they mature well enough to move out of the house and move into their own home, which is the land of Israel. And God warns them, now look, if you do the right things, you get to stay in the house. You get to live in your own house, you'll do well. I'm going to make sure that you're taken care of, but you have to live according to the family values. Some years later, they failed to live according to the family values, and they were exiled. They were evicted from their house. But God made a covenant with them and said, look, I will keep the covenant. And even with you serving other gods and bowing down to other gods, I will bring you back from the nations. So we are now at 577. We're at close to the end of a 6,000-year period of maturity. And I sometimes wonder how much have we actually matured as a world and as a nation. But it's time to grow up. Do you remember the time when you decided, especially for the men, it's time to be a big boy? Can't act like a fool anymore. I've got to be responsible for my wife and children. It's time. I can't do it anymore. Well, what redemption's going to do is call people to be men and to step up, and women to step up. Real spiritual beings created with a responsibility. And that is going to be shared with the nations. I'm going to finish this out, if you don't mind. The second state is somewhat better, and it is one in which we now live. We acknowledge of both the existence and perfection of God. His Torah is available to us, and thus we serve Him. Still, we live in a time when there is neither sign nor prophet or true enlightenment of divine inspiration. The Ruach HaKodesh is lacking. Even though man can gain very much knowledge through his own intellect and human endeavor, this cannot be compared to what he can gain through spiritual inspiration granted by God. The two are different as the body and the soul. Now the third is still a better state. He says, the existence of the holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash, when it stood. During this period, there were wonders and miracles, and prophecy could be found among men, prophetic inspiration, however, was not granted to all mankind, only a few. Now the fourth state is going to be the best. This very best state will be a time that the prophets predicted in the ultimate future. This will be the time when folly will cease and we become big boys and girls, right? Folly will cease to exist completely. Divine inspiration will be poured onto all mankind and will be attained without any difficulty whatsoever. Can you imagine a world in which there's no evil? Wow. I don't know how he's going to do it. He obviously has a great plan in time and in hand. At this time, humanity will be considered to have attained full maturity. From then on, mankind will experience constant elevation and will delight in God forever. Let's go to paragraph 5 and we'll conclude. The influence that God grants to man spiritually is also circumscribed by time, place, and other considerations. God thus decrees the arranging things so that in certain ways more should be revealed to some specific times than others, and the same is also true in particular places where more is revealed in one particular time than the other. There are many aspects and details involved in this, all determined with the utmost precision according to what is most suitable for the rectification of creation as a whole. In conclusion, I would like to say this. There are many times that we all beat ourselves up because we realize that we lack so much. And then we sit and we think, well, wow, if this could have happened to me at this age, or if this wouldn't have happened to me at this age, maybe I could have been at this place. And we think about all the things that has happened in the past, and we wish they wouldn't, and the bad decision we made, you wish you made a better decision. But all of that is immaterial to God. And I came to a place that I realized that I had to say, okay, God, you realize you're partly responsible for who I am. right? Actually, you're fully responsible for who I am. So therefore, I can't even look in the past as it being good, bad, or indifferent. It is what it is. And if you somehow will help me, I will achieve what you want me to achieve in this world. But it only comes through your assistance, divine assistance. And at some point, I take the burden off of me to realize that I'm here because the Creator put me here at this time and space. He gave me the right amount of adjustment, measure, light, darkness, negative, good, bad. All these things were just a mixtures, like putting together a beautiful dish. And at some point in the process, I may not look like it now, but I know at the end of the process, I will be ready to receive full redemption when Mashiach comes. I'll be ready to receive it. He is prepping each one of us, even people that you don't think are as connected as they should be. Somehow they have to go through all their maturations, the maturity, to get to the place that they are. And then one day, Mashiach will come and give the final dose. Everybody will have the dose that they're supposed to have. That concludes this shiur. May Hashem bless you and keep you until tomorrow for our Torah study. Anybody comments? Any questions? No? None? Wow. Easy.